This is your opportunity to win a Porsche Classic watch. So just go to the Collector Car Podcast on Instagram, like the watch promo image, share with your friends, and then go to collectorcarpodcast.com and answer a question from this episode. Every friend you tag multiplies your chances of winning. The rules are posted at thecollectorcarpodcast.com. Mclaren Garage is a company designing unique garages, condos, and other structures specifically for the auto enthusiast. They've got 8 models to choose from, including 2-story options, which I think is super cool, all with a very modern look and feel to them. And they come in all sizes, and they're fully customizable. You can check out them today and start speccing your own ultimate garage at McLarenGarage.com, where you can request a catalog or talk to someone to learn more. So be sure to check it out. Hey, it's Greg Stanley. If you're listening to this podcast, you know I love everything automotive. This passion has expanded to include being a car specialist consultant for RM Sotheby's. So if you need assistance buying or consigning a collector car at any one of our online or live auctions, including Scottsdale, Amelia Island, or Monterey, you can reach one of our car specialists at rmsotheby's.com, or you can email me directly at gstanley@rmsotheby's.com.
This is the Collector Car Podcast, the home for the auto enthusiast. Join Greg Stanley as he applies over 25 years of insights and analytical experience to the collector car market. He will interview the experts and throw in some fun stuff as well.
Hey, it's Greg Stanley with the Collector Car Podcast. I am super excited with my guest today. Today I have Matt Farah of the Smoking Tire joining us. Matt, how you doing today?
Great. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm doing fantastic. I've been a big fan of your videos, your podcast, and you're doing a bazillion automotive types of things. So if you would, could you tell our listeners kind of where do all of those tendrils go to in the car world?
Yeah, there's like an oil drum with like little hoses in it on trickle. That's the gig economy. No, I do car reviews on the Smoking Tire YouTube channel. I do the Smoking Tire podcast, which you can get where you get podcasts, or on YouTube / The Smoking Tire Podcast. I write new car reviews for Road and Track magazine, and I am the owner of Westside Collector Car Storage here in Playa Vista, California.
Yeah, that's incredibly awesome. And you've probably driven more cool cars than anyone I've ever met. So if you had to guess on how many different cars you have driven over the years, take a wild guess. Is it?
I mean, it's like somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it's. I stopped counting. I mean, the number of car reviews is like 1,800, but I don't know. Wow. I couldn't tell you how many cars I've just taken a spin in and not written, but it's been a lot. It's a lot. Yeah.
So I didn't mean this for part of the interview, but I'll ask it anyway. Is that looking back at all those interviews or those reviews of cars, are there any that were just absolutely horrendous?
Cars?
Like obviously there's not a great, yeah, like ones that just stick out your whole.
Yeah, but here's the thing. To get to that number, I drove people's personal stuff. It's not like I drove 1,800 brand new cars, for provided by manufacturer for review. There's probably been 300 to 400 of those. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because, I've been doing this 12 years. I get a car for a week at a time. I don't remember. I couldn't do that math. But with people's, the worst ones I've ever driven were cars that were owned, built, modified heavily by individuals of incredibly limited experience and in some cases incredibly limited competence.
Probably made for an interview, interesting review though, entertaining, right?
Well, usually, in hindsight, because in those cases, I'd have the owner of the car in the car with me. I mean, that was the thing, right? I'd be driving these cars on camera for the first time, and the owner would be in the car with me. And so there's only so mean I'm willing to be when the person is sitting, right there, and so in pretty much every case, when I drove something that I really hated, I was, in my opinion, incredibly charitable over, and part of that is that's part of the reason that I don't really drive people's personally built cars anymore, and I haven't for a few years because, frankly, it's not that rewarding for me anymore. It was a strategy that resulted in success and money, but it was not that intellectually rewarding to judge someone's build to their face, on camera and go, here's me and here's Dave and we're in Dave's car. Now, did Dave do a good job? Like, let's find out. There's an entertainment value for sure, but there's definitely not a lot of consumer value, and there's not a lot of like depth to that story. It's a bunch of first impressions, right? And so with new cars, you're talking about hopefully a new product. So there's more to talk about than just revisiting an older car. And you also, I take the car home. I use it in my life. I go to the store. I go to work. I go to the canyons. I do a bunch of different things with it. And so by the time I film the review, usually on the last or second to last day I have the car, I have a breadth of topics to talk about that are a little more different, a little more interesting than how's the power, how's the brakes, did this kid ruin it, and so but as a means to creating an assembly line type process where I could review 6 or 7 cars in a single day, I couldn't have done it without those individuals being willing to bring me their cars. And so once I discovered YouTube was that much of a volume model, I chased that until I, flamed out mentally.
Right. Yeah. Well, what are you driving this week? What cars have you been in? Are you driving anything, testing
I'm
anything
going to
fun?
disappoint you because this past week I was driving a Volvo cross country, V90 cross country, because my parents came to visit for the first time in many months, and I was shuttling my parents around and doing all kinds of activities. This weekend I have a Harley-Davidson press bike, and it's a Fat Bob, and it's the first time I've ever ridden a traditional Harley-Davidson. It's my second Harley, but I was on the Pan America last week, their new adventure motorcycle that's very cool and very modern. And if you took the Harley-Davidson badging off it, it could be a KTM or a BMW or an Aprilia or a Moto Guzzi or any kind of medium level adventure touring modern bike, and it was very cool. So I asked them if they would send me a traditional Harley so I could have a go in one of the more old school style bikes. And and on Monday I get the new Mustang Mach 1, which should be fun. Yeah,
those are good looking. You're a Mustang guy, right?
Well, I don't want to say I'm a guy or any kind of a guy. I have If we add up all the vehicles that I've owned throughout my life, as it turns out, I have owned more Fords than anything else. And I'm not entirely sure why that is. It's not because my parents drove Fords or anything like that. And it's not because I'm particularly aligned with any specific thing about Ford. But I did have a Mustang when I was a kid that we built up and modified, and I then had a Fox body that I had about 6-7 years ago that I modified, and we were on the cover of CarCraft, and that was pretty cool. And I sold it in the great clean out of 2015 when I lost my building and had to get rid of all my cars, hence building a giant car storage facility. But I also, I had a Fiesta ST, I had a Raptor, I had a Focus RS. I now own a Mach-E, the electric one. And so I had a Mercury Mountaineer, which is kind of a Ford. It's the Mercury Explorer when that was a thing. And so I guess, I've had a variety of new, cutting edge, and exciting Ford products. Yeah.
Right.
But I also owned a Corvette and a Volt. Right. So I had 2 cutting edge, exciting GM products. I tend to buy cutting edge. If I'm buying a new car, it tends to be a cutting edge, exciting, new car. Yeah. And then I have a bunch of weird old stuff.
How would you compare the Mach-E to the Model Y?
I'm sorry. Could you broke up just a little bit? Say that again.
How would you compare the Mach-E to the Model Y?
It's so you don't have the supercharger network, right? Which is a downgrade for Ford. I don't need public charging. I have chargers here at Westside Collector Car Storage, so 1 day a week on the juice, and we're good with that. In my opinion, the Mach-E is just like a Model Y, but it's screwed together better.
Okay.
That's my opinion. It's built better. In a lot of other ways, it's almost exactly the same. Indistinguishable. It has a tablet. I think Tesla's system is a little more refined, and Ford's system will get there. Their software interface, they have over-the-air updates, and we've already gotten a couple of them. I think Tesla's big tablet system has had, 10 years at this point, of refining that software. And so it's a little bit more stable than the Ford one is, but I think the driving experience of the Ford is really nice. The space, the usability, the stereo, the Bang & Olufsen stereo, it's a really nice product. I'm very happy with it. I'm about to write 1,500 words for my first 3 months with it for carbibles.com in the next couple of weeks. So I'll have a piece coming out about that. Surprisingly, I haven't made any videos with them. I did a review of the press car, and then I went out and bought one. But I did not. I haven't made a video with my personal one.
Yeah, they're good-looking cars. I think they did the Heritage Mustang brake lights pretty nice on that Mach-E.
Yeah.
I thought it looked good.
By far, the worst thing about the Mach-E is that there are horses on it. Like,
yes,
like they could have done it. I don't call it Mustang. I would prefer it was just Mach-E with some kind of styling cue that wasn't a horse. But I understand why they did it, and it obviously didn't keep me from buying the car. So
yeah, for sure. Well, the reason I asked how many cars have you driven, how many have you tested, all that kind of stuff, is because you're here for our Ultimate Garage series, which is where I shoehorn you into 10 cars that would be in your Ultimate Garage, and
I didn't realize you were trying to get me to there. Maybe you should. I wouldn't have taken such a hard left. I'm sorry. I didn't really get defensive about my Fords that I really like.
Hard lefts are fine. Hard lefts are fine. So no, I just want the listeners to understand. Cars.
Sure.
And you really know about driving cars and experiencing cars more than even the average car expert, I would say. So I really appreciate.
But you didn't say. Just so you know, you didn't in the email. You weren't like, come up with 10 of the cars you've driven from your real experience. So there's cars on my list that I have not actually driven. Does that matter?
No, because in my Ultimate Garage, 9 of the 10 cars I haven't driven. So yeah, that's not
okay. Cool. All right. Cool.
Yeah. All right, so let's dig into these 10 cars. I got the list in front of me. I got some of the Hagerty values just to give our listeners an idea.
I'm not a cheap date.
No, you're not a cheap date at all.
I am not a cheap date, man.
Well, why don't we start with the big ticket item then, instead of leaving that for last?
Start wherever you want to start, man.
Let's do the McLaren F1.
Right. Not shocking. McLaren F1. I mean, if you're someone my age, I'm 39, the McLaren F1 is it. It's the game over, right? It's the king of analog supercars, and very rare, justifiably so. I drove one very briefly in not in anger at all, and it was the coolest. And I had a ride in one at a next up level of sport, and it was just extremely excellent. And the game over, really. Yeah,
that's interesting, and I'm really finding it interesting. You also picked the Ferrari F40. Reason being is I interviewed Wayne Carini he picked an F40. He did not pick an F1. And then McKeel Hagerty picked an F1 and not an F40. You've picked both. So why did you pick both from the same era? Are they that different of a driving experience to make it worth your while to have two spots in your ultimate garage?
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course they're different. The F40, I mean, the F40 is not a modern car. It's an old school car. It's, it's got the gated shifter. It's, it's got 328 bones or 308 bones, you could say. And I own a Ferrari 328, so I can't afford an F40, but I love Ferraris of that era. And I wanted with my car. The 308s are really slow. The extra power and torque of the 328 made a difference to me, and so I have a 328, and I love it. I drive it all the time, and of that era, the ultimate is the F40, but it's an old school car. The McLaren F1 is a transitional car. The engine is more modern. The gearbox and certain other things about it are much more modern, but at the same time, compared to today's cars, it's still old school and analog, for sure. And I mean, any real driver's car collection, if you're talking about fantasy playing and unlimited money, is highly likely to include both of those items. Sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. Now, our next one on the list, talking about old school, is one that's in your garage currently. Tell us about the Countach.
My Countach is an 88. I've owned it for about 3 years. It's not just my favorite car that I own. It's probably my favorite thing that I own. It is very fun to drive. It's red with gold wheels and a tan interior. It's a very Hollywood car, not just in general. My car specifically, it's done commercials with Cindy Crawford, James Corden. It's been in photo shoots with Diddy. It's been in a Muse music video. It's currently in the Ralph Lauren campaign for red cologne with Ansel Elgort from Baby Driver.
Nice.
And I drive it a lot. I take it out. At first, when I first bought it, I drove it once a week. But as my shop opened and I bought my Ferrari and other stuff, I can't do it once a week. But I take it out probably every 2 to 3 weeks for a really good 50 to 80 mile run. And it's just fabulous. It's wherever you go with it, you win. You're the winner. I mean, any cars and coffee, you show up in a Countach, you win. And mine has some extremely cool features because the first owner of mine was a guy named Al Bertoni, who is sort of famous Lamborghini tuner from the 80s, 70s and 80s, and even into the 90s a bit. And so it has this prototype Al Bertoni exhaust on it. It also has these remote door poppers, so you can actually pop the doors open on a remote fob from like across the street. Wow. I've never seen another Countach that has that, and I freak people out with that. It's got the Alpine stereo and the wing, and it's just the coolest. And it's a little clunky when it's cold. When the fluids are cold, there's a lot of fluid in the car, a lot of oil, a lot of coolant. But once heat soaks through the engine, which takes about 15 minutes of driving, it's as fabulous as anything. I mean, it's just so nice to row the gears and rev the engine to 8,000, and I drive it. And once I got over being, when I first bought it, I was terrified of it, because it was the most expensive thing I've ever bought by a lot, other than my house. And but once I got over the fear and started driving it a lot, the last owner didn't drive it very much. And so I started driving it a lot. And after a couple months of really driving it a lot, the car was kind of like, oh, this is what this is going to be like. And it all of a sudden became, it warmed up faster, it idled really smooth. It fires on the first crank. It's not a pain in the ass. It's cost me very little money to keep it going. The miles, in my opinion, have been very cheap. And meanwhile, the value in the car has gone up. And it's not why I bought it. I had hoped that would be the case, but that certainly wasn't why I bought it. In my opinion, whatever miles I put on it, hopefully will be offset by the desirability of that car, which is extremely, extremely high. Fortunately, I mean, it's a very desirable car. But I don't ever really want to get rid of it. I mean, it's so fun to take it out. Like it's I have people in my life that it's like all they ever want in their life is to go out in it once.
Right.
Please take me out in it just once, and then to go out and not just like up the road, but I'll take them in the canyons and we'll go. We go for a run. I run the car, and they're like, oh my god, like they can't believe I'm out there, mobbing a Countach through the canyons, and it doesn't disappoint. It does. That car does not disappoint. I think its reputation as being not good is not correct, really at all.
Now you obviously probably dreamed about that car for 15, 20 years, I would bet.
Oh yeah. I had the poster when I was a kid. I had it. I had the poster. I had the magazines. I was obsessed.
So did it exceed your expectations? Where did it sounds like it did, but I just
yeah. It definitely does. Yeah, especially because throughout the early 2000s, when I started being able to drive what was currently on sale at the time, Murciélagos, Gallardos, Ferrari 360s, and stuff like that. At that time, Countach was minimum cool.
Yeah.
And really everyone was like, that they're kind of a piece of junk. And I had drove like a friend who had a shop, and he let me drive one like just kind of around, briefly. But I now know it was ice cold. It wasn't really running that great to begin with. It wasn't a really high quality example, and it was clunky. And my car is better than that. It has. It's if you talk to people who have got them, there's two types of Countach owners. It doesn't move, or they drive it all the time. There's almost nothing in between. Jay Leno drives his all the time. I know all 8 people that have a Countach in Los Angeles County that I know of that take them out, and they all drive them. They all drive them a bunch. Yeah, it's good.
Got to drive them to keep them running well.
Driving it keeps it running well, better than almost any other thing you could do. We service it frequently. I do oil changes every 2,000 miles, and we service it frequently. But preventative, right?
Right. Well, the next car on your list threw me a little bit. Actually, a couple of your cars threw me a little bit. The Bentley Continental Sc, 1999. That one threw me a little bit.
So good, right? Short wheelbase, wide body, big engine, removable Targa roof. I mean, that is, that is as close as you got to that period to coach building, like in the old school way. It was the last of that run of Bentleys before Volkswagen took over. Big 6 3/4 twin turbo motor, stately, but with the short wheelbase, also kind of sporty, almost also like a homologation rally car, or something like that. And, rare enough that, cool enough, especially with the Targa top, that you didn't have to be a supercar enthusiast to know you were looking at something very cool, especially with those box flares. But if you did know what you were looking at, it was like, oh, that's what that is, the Continental R and the T's, which were regular, there's the regular wheelbase, the short wheelbase, and then this was the most extreme one where you could take the roof off also. And I just think that is very cool. I love those cars.
Isn't this when they described the horsepower as more than adequate? They want to give you the
those. I think those were Rolls Royces. These were the Bentleys were always like I think these were around 425 horsepower, I believe, and probably 500 pounds of torque.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, this next one threw me again for a little bit. I get why, but it did throw me initially. A Ferrari F355 GTS 6-speed. Tell us why that car and not other manual Ferraris of the same era.
Well, that car is the best. I mean, I could have put F50 on there, but if I really had to choose F40 or F50, I think I'd probably prefer the F40. But the 355, in my opinion, is the best sounding, and it's a perfect balance between that old school wedge shape that began in the 80s and carry, with the Testarossa and ended with the 355. This engine that used parts from the Formula One engine, which made it sound so spectacular. I mean, the best Ferrari V8 sound, I think, ever. The gated 6-speed manual.
Yeah.
So you had your gates, but you didn't have the dog leg to deal with, which in traffic sucks. The GTS means you have the benefits of a convertible, but without any kind of power mechanism. You just latch and unlatch the roof. I love anytime Ferrari has offered a GTS model, whether it was a 308, 328, 348, 355, or now the 812, anytime they've offered it, it's been the best version of the car. Period.
Right.
I'll die on that hill. Pick your model. The GTS was the best one.
Daytona GTS 4-cam.
Daytona GTS 4-cam as well. Absolutely. And so yeah, I mean, old school style, modern enough to drive in a traffic jam or in the city and know you're not going to smoke the clutch, you're not going to overheat it, and fast enough to be a really good time, great sounding, good gearing. And if you had all the money in the world, you'd have an entire extra powertrain on a stand. So when it came time to service it, you would just swap the powertrain in, and then they could service the other engine on the stand. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Now, the next one on your list, I totally get. This is on my list. The Ferrari 550 Barchetta 6-speed manual.
Yeah.
Tell us why that car and why not the Super America?
Because... assuming I get to buy all of these 10 cars on the list. I don't just have to pick one off of the list. The idea of a GT Ferrari where you have to commit to not having a roof with you at all is G. I like that.
Right.
The Super America, I like it's got that electrochromic glass, which I think was very neat for the time, but I don't like how it looks when the roof is flipped open. And I really you show up somewhere that's more than 100 miles from where you live in a Barchetta, and you've made a commitment. And I like that. I like that very much.
I think,
and also, that was also the first Ferrari I ever got to drive. A family friend owned one, and so the first Ferrari I ever had to go in was a 550 Barchetta. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're one of the prettiest. I mean, just the roll bars in the back and the way
they're cool.
Cover. I mean, it's just gorgeous. Yeah. All right, the next one is related to the Countach, but it's a little bit later. The Diablo, but the 6.0 GT. So this is the rear-wheel drive only. Is that right?
Yeah, the GT is rear-wheel drive. It was sort of a lightweight. It was the homologation for their fairly lame GT1 effort when they went racing with Diablos for like a second. But it was very light and very raw, and it was manual gearbox. They had started working with carbon fiber quite a bit, so it's got carbon on the interior and stuff. And it was the 6.0, so it was post Audi takeover. So you were left with you had Diablo styling, and it was still fundamentally the Lamborghini powertrain, but Audi had really gone through it by then and made sure that it was the usability was up to the kind of standards that Volkswagen Audi Group could stand behind. It's the last of the original pre-merger Lambos. Before Audi had really any influence on the design whatsoever. Raw, manual, V12, doors go up, very pretty, but still, drivable, usable,
Right. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
All right, we got 3 more to go. Let's see. The next one's a Porsche 964 Turbo 3.6 liter. That's actually that was the first turbo I really fell in love with.
The Turbo 3.6 was the Bad Boys car. from the first Bad Boys when they had the drag race down the runway with the Shelby Cobra. And so that was its Hollywood moment for me. But the turbo is the last. That's the last of the rear wheel drive turbo cars, with single turbocharger instead of twin. I love a 964. I think they're modern enough to use every single day, and they still have enough of the old school feel. And as far as 964s go, unless you could either go in the RS direction, or you could go in the turbo direction. And for me, if I had to pick one, I would go in the turbo direction. So yeah, the Turbo 3.6 is the big daddy of air-cooled turbo cars, and they're very rare. We don't see them very often, even here in California, where we see all the Porsches.
Right. Well, speaking of which, the next one, second from last, is the 911R from 2016, which I just think they hit that thing out of the ballpark. I just think that thing's gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of car where I would buy one new, and I would just put all the miles on it. I mean, I would just drive it as a car. It's easy enough to use as an everyday car. It's a blast in the canyons. I've had them at the limit on the racetrack, and they're light and agile and very fast. They sound great. I love the throwback houndstooth interior. If I'm really spending, real money, it's only incrementally better than the 911 GT3 Touring, which is a lot cheaper. But we're not spending real money. We're playing with fake money. And if we're going to play with fake money, then I'm going to get the more expensive one.
That's right. No, I love the way you think. All right, the last one, which I saw this one coming just based on some of our conversations. Lancia 037, one of the Group B cars, right?
Yeah, that is a Group B rally car. It's one of those cars that it doesn't even, they made a street version. It doesn't even really look like it should have a street version. It actually looks a lot like the Ford RS 200 in that the front and the back look like they're from completely different cars. Honestly, I like how they look. I like the connection to homologation Group B cars. But the reason I put that on there is because I've spent a lot of time driving that thing in video games. And I think, at least in Forza, it drives absolutely brilliantly. And if it drives anything like that in real life, I would not be disappointed in that at all.
So is that one of the rare cars you have not driven?
I've also not driven a Diablo GT on this list. What else? I think there might be something else on the list I've never driven as well. I've driven a 964 Turbo, but I've never driven a Turbo 3.6. So
that's splitting hairs.
Yeah. No, I've never driven a Diablo GT either. I have not driven a Lancia 037 in real life. I've driven one in video games only. I've driven a Stratos, and that's certainly unique. And I've driven Delta Integrale, both rally cars and street cars. And I've driven a Fulvia as well, which is an incredibly disappointing car to drive. The Stratos is very unique. I didn't like it very much, but I understand why somebody would like it, and I understand its importance in history, and it certainly would be an excellent addition to a Group B collection or really an Italian collection, or just a collection of awesome stuff.
Well, I know we're playing with fake money here, but if I add up the approximate values of all the cars in your ultimate garage, you are somewhere around $29 million.
Well, I better get to work, huh?
You better get to work.
I better park a lot of cars down here.
That's right. You got some great taste. I appreciate your time on that. Now, one thing I do at the end here, and I don't remember if I gave you a heads up on this, I play a little game I call Keep Cash and Crush. So I give you 3 cars.
I understand. Yeah, there's another version of it that is FMK, and I don't want to. I assume the rules are the same.
The rules are the same.
Okay.
Yeah, there's one you're going to have to keep forever, one you're going to have to cash in, and then one you're going to have to crush.
Got it.
Okay, so here are your 3 cars. I said I wouldn't pick any of your ultimate cars in your garage there, but I'm going to pick the Group B rally cars,
little curveball here. I'm going to pick an Audi Quattro, the Lancia Delta Integrale, and then the Ford RS 2000.
Okay. And the Ford, I assume you mean the mid-engine one and not the variant of the Escort?
The vintage one.
All right. Well, I would have to sell get rid of the RS Ford because it's very cool, but I tried to sit in one once and it was not good. It wasn't good. Yeah, it wasn't good. I would, and then what was the other one? The Lancia and the Quattro?
Quattro.
I would keep the Lancia forever.
Okay.
And I would, what is the other option? Cash?
Crush.
Oh, yeah. I'd crush the Audi, keep the Lancia, and get rid of sell the Ford.
Okay, those are pretty good choices. I would,
a friend of mine owns an S1 Quattro, Sport Quattro, short wheelbase, street car.
Is that Zuck?
It's Zuckerman. I've driven it. I've driven Zuckerman's car.
You're going to crush his car?
You know, that is a car that when it was here for my grand opening at Westside Collector Car Storage, and we had it up on the racks, and I loved looking at it every day. It was really, really cool to look at every day. But I also drove it, and I just didn't care for how it drove. It drove because of the short wheelbase. The handling is very twitchy. I know why it had a short wheelbase, but let me just say that Hans Stuck didn't like the short wheelbase either. He continued to race the long wheelbase as long as they let him, and he didn't like the short wheelbase ever. It's for like the Monte Carlo rally. It actually it handled like it steered like the Stratos actually, strangely enough. And you know, considering how much those things cost, and they cost a lot, I don't think the driving experience alone justifies their cost. Whereas a really nice Delta Integrale Evo, you know, is like $80,000, and that's a lot. You know, that's collector grade, but it's a lot easier to swallow that than it is for $400 for an S1 Quattro that steers weird. You know?
Well, I love the fact you probably crushed the most expensive one, so I appreciate that. Just be sure to tell Zuckerman you crushed his car.
I'm glad he has one. Zuckerman has excellent taste. I mean, Zuckerman, you know, and he knows what to buy and when to buy it and where to buy it and when to sell it. I mean, he's a very smart guy. He's a very astute car collector. So, as part of a 15 or 20 car collection, I think that's an excellent pice to have. You know what I'm talking about? But if the alternative is keep it forever or crush it right now, I don't want it forever. You feel me? You know?
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. Yeah, I appreciate your time today. Tell our listeners again where they can find you.
You can find the landing page for everything is thesmokingtire.com, but you can also find my car reviews at youtube.com/thesmokingtire, my podcast at youtube.com/thesmokingtirepodcast, or anywhere you download podcasts like iTunes and Google and Spotify and blah, 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 blah. I write car reviews for Road and Track. I write kind of like I talk, so if you want to see my voice in writing, that's pretty much what you're getting there. And if you're in Los Angeles and you need some place to keep a very special car, short-term or long, Westside Collector Car Storage in Playa Vista.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Matt.
Of course. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Collector Car Podcast. Don't forget to give us a nice rating on iTunes, and be sure to follow us on Instagram and everywhere else at the Collector Car Podcast.